Very often I like to start these presentations by telling people that I work in a pretend industry, which is the motion picture industry. We make pretend for a living. That's what we do, right? We don't make real things, we make pretend. And I have a pretend job in a pretend industry where they let me go and pretend. And they let me go and just figure out things that might be. So I live in the what if. I live in the maybe this might be something world. I'm not, oddly enough, a particularly technical person. I really study the human equation and how humans react and relate to technology. And that has, oddly enough, for now, 20 plus years of my working life become something that is kind of called a job. Growing up in this world of Orlando, Florida, I discovered that everything was about looking ahead. And Walt and all of the people that touched his world were never about being afraid, were never about the status quo. We're always about joy and enchantment and trying new things, and if it didn't work, we'll try it again. And if that didn't work, we'll make some alterations and we'll try it again. And somehow that culture kind of seeped into me as a very, very young kid. And I think anybody that works in the creative arts in any way, shape, or form, which is 90% of you, maybe 100% in here, right? And everybody would say they work in the creative industry in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. There is so much to be learned from having an open mind, from keeping things within the realm of what might be, what is possible, what can be, not what is. If you're in anything creative, I think the first thing you want to do is try and get yourself in a headspace where you're not looking for the next job, you're looking for the next inspiration. You're looking for the next thing that is going to help you, help your neighborhood, help your city, help your country, help the world. And that's kind of an interesting path. It's sort of like, you're swerving around as opposed to trying to take this direct path toward, I need to get my next job. The interesting legacy as you kind of connect the dots 25 years later is that the fact that your mobile devices, your pocketable devices, and your laptops and your iPads and your computers all have this video circuitry and componentry that is effectively now not just broadcast quality but cinema quality. People are shooting movies that you could put up on a movie screen with an iPhone today. All had to start somewhere. And I was that kind of help that group start somewhere. And I think a lot of it came from just having an open mind and not being afraid to try it. A really, really, really good, engaging story that moves you through an emotional journey and an emotional arc is the one thing we as entertainers can count on as the common thread that makes stuff good. Pretty much every one of those Nickelodeon shows that you watched as a kid, I worked on all that stuff. And all the Disney parades and all this crazy stuff, and I did all this stuff for PBS, and it was an interesting life. So that was sort of step one. Step two was a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, whose wife went to the University of Nebraska, said, you need to get out of Florida and get to the show. The show. You gotta get to the West Coast. Through a number of kind of connection points, I got introduced to this company in Northern California that was building all of these kind of video guts for the entertainment industry and the TV industry. And I helped build what became this thing that we call desktop video for computers. The ability to move actual broadcast quality and eventually cinematic quality video on computers. When I was doing that, a friend of mine, who was a neighbor of mine, we started this little hard drive company together because we thought that Apple needed a better solution than the current hard drives, because now that people were putting these boards inside computers and moving video around in them, the hard drives they were using were failing all the time. And then at the tail end of that, I met this crazy billionaire who was one of the most interesting, magnanimous, fascinating people on the planet. So I got introduced to him, and he and I started working on this secret project together. That started in 2005, which ended up becoming this thing called the Red Camera, which some people probably are shown on. So I was the first employee of that company. A lot of those people in the early days of Red, it was so disruptive that we were trying to do this new thing, and a lot of people that really worked in the entertainment industry were like the desktop video guy from Apple and the Sunglass King, the guy who started Oakley was the guy who started Red. and they're going to build a movie camera that we're going to care about? No. But there were a few people in the entertainment industry, and one of them was one of the heads of 20th Century Fox. His name was also Ted. And he and I became very close friends. And when I sort of put the word out that I was going to leave the camera company, he called me up. He's like, you know, you should come over to the lot. We have an idea. Okay, so we sit down, we have lunch, and we start talking about it. It's like, we think we want someone to like look at the future of the movie business. And we think you're that guy. You don't have a job description for it. It's like, no, you'll have to figure that out. You don't exactly know who I'm going to work with. No, it'll be me and other people, but you'll figure that out too. And you don't exactly know what you want me to do. He's like, that's correct. And you can put in as many hours a week as you want and come in and out. And I'm like, okay, well, it sounds like a dream job. So I was the guy that I guess has always been in the, you have no business being in this business guy. And they liked that, and they said, take a shot at it. And by the way, we think it'll be really fun. We'll call you Futurist. They have no business being in this business. Is an interesting thing to learn about as people that are young and creative and trying to figure out what your path should be. Because every sort of step of my professional career after the production world would be tied to this tenet of they have no business doing this. They have no business trying to change video, which is these dedicated devices, into something that computers are going to do. They have no business trying to move media on little hard drives and not tapes. They have no business trying to build a movie camera when we shoot film, right? And the latest no business is they have no business trying to take over the world of broadcast television, right? Well, we all know where that story is going, right? The cinema industry, right? Television, cinema. It's always been this intermarriage of the day's technology and the relevant stories and the people that wanted to tell stories in these mediums, right? You cannot break technology away from the art of visual storytelling. If I go all the way back, here's a Disney reference for you.
I like it.
To Steamboat Willie, right? And the voice, which I think was Disney himself, that did the voice of Steamboat Willie. Those things don't really exist, but we can make them look so engaging and so interesting and connect so much emotion to these things that aren't real, right? But they're still real. There's still someone writing something, creating something, bringing it to life. But it all started when people started realizing they could make things and tie a human sort of spirit or an animal spirit or any kind of spirit to it. The next wave of storytelling crafting is going to happen when real life and digital life blend in a way that is much, much more powerful than we can do today. And by the way, this is not science fiction, this is not the future, this is happening right now. People are creating story worlds where you're going to wear this device and you will start to not know, is it really real or not real? So what's interesting, and a main sort of thesis of my life these days, which is kind of where this sort of pseudo-futuristic thing comes in, is this 10-year journey, which is going to start in 2020, and it's just starting to happen now, into the 2030 time frame, when you're likely going to be wearing your data, not holding your data. How long do you think this is going to be? It's been this way for 10 years. 10 years before this, it didn't look like this. If you remember what it looked like. 20 years before this, it was, remember Gordon Gekko with the big fork? And then you had the clamshells, right? So the point is, does it make sense to wear it at some point? And how often will you wear it for the first couple years that someone comes out with stuff that you're going to wear? Versus, will it get to a point, just like with your smartphone, that there will be a day and there will be a life that you will lead where you simply won't be able to go without it? There'll be a day, probably somewhere in the next, let's call it 5 to 7 years aggressively, 7 to 10 years comfortably, where you will leave your smartphone at home and you won't turn around because you'll have something better. Every major technological force on planet Earth today, the list goes on and on, are all dedicating not hundreds of millions, but billions and billions of dollars into the next horizon of computing, which we call spatial computing, which we call wear it and the world comes to life. There is no screen anymore, there is no border. For 125 years, we've lived in some sort of bordered universe with every single thing we do, from an entertainment, productivity, communication standpoint. absolutely every single day, I'm experimenting with what we call spatial computing. I'm pulling things out of thin air, manipulating them, playing with them, entertaining myself with them. The next horizon, the next battlefield for technology happens to be where our eyes are. A lot of us already wear glasses in some way, shape, or form. And eventually in the either Black Mirror or the utopian version, you'll have some kind of chip that you'll be able to put on, and people when I talk about them, I talk to people oh, I'm never doing that. I'm like, well, here's a LASIK, right?
Okay. I got LASIK.
So we're already manipulating your eyes.
Yeah.
You're already doing it. If they said at the same time, let's say, oh, by the way, we can get this augmented thing, you can turn it on and off whenever you want, and have this amazing future.
An amazing to-do
in the year 2040, sure. Would that be of interest to you, right? That's kind of my story journey. I kind of lived this life, and then I moved into this life, and it became something that was very innately powerful to me, and I enjoyed it, and I kept enjoying it. And when you do this stuff, there are lots of dark days where you just stuff's not working, and you're never going to get there, and it's a whole disaster, and the clock is ticking, and the money clock is ticking, and you're spending lots of other people's money, and you better hope you get it right. And there's been lots of wrong and lots of right. But when I look at sort of the media sphere that I've had some minute influence on, I think it's valuable, and I think that more good has come out of it than not so good. And I think that helps communities. I think technology, for the most part, in the right hands, can help communities accomplish the goal.